Hi, today on Catherine Learns Stuff, I'm going to walk you through making a custom dust cover for your heat press. So let's jump in. I like to use my heat press for a lot of projects, but I find that in between projects it sits around and gets covered in dust. So I wanted to make a dust cover for it that would allow me to keep it safe when it's not used, but also look somewhat nice. Before I could start this activity, I needed to measure my heat press to make sure I had an idea of how much fabric I was going to need. I like to do all of my measurements by hand and just doing little sketches. What I did with my heat press is I made sure that I had it in a closed position with the handle down, because that's how I typically store it when I'm not using it. And I had to measure all the dimensions, the length, the width, the height, sort of all of the weird angles for the handle and the overhangs, just so that I would have an idea of how much fabric I needed. Once I had my dimensions figured out, it was time to sketch out sort of the pieces that I would need to cover up my heat press. I decided that I was going to have two side panels that were the same size and one long piece of fabric that would kind of cover the whole thing over the top and the other two sides. This gave me sort of a weird rhombus shape on the two sides and a long rectangle that would go over the top. So I had a tablecloth that I bought that no one in my family liked, so I thought instead of giving it away or disposing of it, I would use it for this craft. So the first thing that I started to do was measure out the side panel. This side panel needed to be the full height from the bottom of the heat press to the top of the frame, and then around the arm from the left to the right, down the arm on an angle, and down again from the top of the handle down to the table. This gave me a weird rhombus shape. I needed two of these pieces, so when cutting this out, I made sure to have the fabric flipped so that I would have a left and a right piece and not two right pieces or two left pieces. And to do that, I just simply placed one on top of the other and traced them out. Finally, I needed one large rectangle that would go over the full length of the rhombus over the top and on both sides. Now for the fun part. I had to pin all three pieces together. I started with one side panel and the long rectangular piece and pinned it all the way around, and making sure that the corners were bent over a little bit to allow for the shape to sort of maintain its position when it was done. Once I had those two pieces pinned together, I repeated the process on the other side. The second side was a little bit easier to pin, as I already had a shape from the pinning that I did on the first half. Before I did any sewing, with my pins in place, I placed this over my heat press to see if it actually fits. So I quickly took this to my sewing machine and sewed around all the pins. The last thing that was needed to be done on this was to add some bias tape around the bottom of the fabric to give it a nice finish. An additional thing that I did, as I was having problems figuring out how to put this on every time I took it off, I added in an additional piece of bias tape in one corner that was a different color, and I dedicated that to be a specific corner on the heat press. So now every time I put this on my heat press, I know how to line it up. And that's it. Your heat press cover is done. The one thing that I want to stress with this project is that even though this heat press cover is good for keeping dust off of your heat press, you need to make sure that you're only applying it onto your heat press after your heat press is completely cooled, and you only want to be turning your heat press on after you have removed the cover. You don't want to have the cover on the heat press at any point in time with the heat still on or the heat press still having heat in it, as it can start to burn, regardless of what type of fabric that you have. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this project. I've listed all the supplies that I've used in the details below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.